Hey, are you still in? Are you sharing your screen?
Really?
I can't hear you, Blaine. I don't know if you're
Think I
copying
can
it or
hear you
not.
at all? Hold on. Uh, if I stop sharing my screen, can you hear me? No? Uh, testing, testing. Testing, 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 testing.
Okay, I don't know if my sound is working, but we can start whenever. I'll let you go ahead and start. And I think we were broadcasting and everything, so.
Okay, sounds good. So my talk is about using Git for all the things, more specifically just versioning, but I obviously do favor Git a little more than other versioning systems. And so first we're going to talk about what you should be versioning. And so just for some things that, a lot of common things that people version right now are like your home directory. It includes like dot files or other things like you might keep. A lot of people like do their Vim configurations, or like there's ESHRCs, things of that nature. You could do individual projects. Obviously, a lot of people do individual projects. Those are all on GitHub, things like that. Or you might even just do your projects directory. If you really want, you could do all of your projects in one single Git repo, just so at least they're versioned. Although I'd recommend you not do that way, but at the same time you could. And then obviously you could even throw Git inside of a Dropbox, so you can version that. I know Dropbox has its own versioning in it, but it's not as awesome, I guess, as I would like. It's been a while since I've really used it, so it might have improved since then, but overall I don't think the Dropbox, I would much rather use the Git versioning than the Dropbox versioning. And that doesn't really work well if you have multiple people involved. I know since it's syncing often, and if most people are using that at the same time, it can get corrupt really quickly. Found that out from experience, so use cautiously. There's some other things you can also version. I know some people do like Thoughtbot has like their daily thoughts on the web. You can also do like your blogs, your writing, or your other things of that nature. Like Jekyll blogs are awesome, and GitHub even showcases a lot of these. You could use databases. There's better alternatives, but you could also version databases. I know the government has a GitHub website, and there's some like sample projects like this one has zip codes that you can just download and start using. Another one I thought was pretty interesting. There's like this BIOS opinion repo. This guy literally put a lot of his opinions online, and if you wanted to talk about it with him or try to change his mind, you simply submitted a pull request, which I thought was pretty interesting. Style guides are also pretty popular. They can be versioned. They could be pull requested against and be changed in theory. And then also PSDs and images are also great versioned, especially with Git. Something interesting that GitHub does, it even does PSD viewing diffing. So if you have two PSDs and then you update them, it'll keep the history for you. I know Photoshop keeps history, but sometimes it erases it. It doesn't always keep all of it. With this, you get the exact moments in time that you wanted. So, oh, this is a perfect version. Let's leave it here for now. Let's commit it and go to the next one. Modify it, commit it, so on and so forth. So you can literally version almost everything that you could ever possibly want, which is always fun to do. Things that you shouldn't version? Really nothing, to be honest. If it's something that you created, you probably need versioning on it. Otherwise, some things that you may not need a version. If like you are doing like a WordPress site, you probably don't need to version WordPress itself because it's versioned somewhere else. Other things, like programs that you downloaded, they're versioned somewhere else, like Photoshop. You don't actually need to version Photoshop because somebody else has versioned that and sent it to you. So I would probably avoid doing that just because it's super big and not really worth anything. I guess the rule of thumb is as long as it's yours, I'd try to version that. And you can also not use Git if you really want. You have the Dropbox versioning, SVN versioning, and even you have if you're writing things like publications or anything like that. There's this service called Draft. It does because Git is usually line by line diffing, so you usually delete a line and add a line. It's not really word by word. So paragraphs that take up an entire line, multiple sentences, don't always work that well. There's versioning for those sorts of things called Draft. You guys can take a look at that. I was playing with it a little bit earlier. It was really fun. And then, of course, there's obviously, once we get into like where we store it, not all GitHubs are created equal, I guess. There's different trade-offs to each one. A lot of people just self-host it. They can either like put it on just their local computer and call that good, or you can even put it on GitHub or Bitbucket, which we'll get into a little bit later, or you could even do like a self-hosted thing where something, a Bitbucket or GitHub alternative, throwing on a central server so that everybody can access it. All these are different alternatives depending on what you need and what you don't need. And so the second thing I was going to talk about is what should you be open sourcing and why? Because obviously it's really important that versioning is awesome, but you should also be taking the next step and actually trying to open source it, give to the open source community, which is helpful for you as well, simply because you'll be able to get things back from that, which is nice. So a lot of people just start with like libraries. So your main repo is private, but you really want to be able to create plugins or things that, hey, I really don't need this. This isn't specifically for my need. It does fill my need, but it also could fulfill other people's needs. Examples of this would be like a WordPress plugin, a jQuery plugin, an Angular, Firefox, or Alfred. Doesn't really matter. A lot of these allow you to create plugins for them, which you can then open source on GitHub or Bitbucket or what have you. So it's really nice to be able to do plugins like that. This is a lot of different people do this. I mean, Vitals, where I work, Basecamp, Etsy, Thoughtbot, New Relic. I mean, almost everybody has libraries that they open source because it's easy. You get collaboration. People give back to those when other companies start using it. They'll patch things for you. You get free work in general, and you're giving stuff back, which I think is always nice. And this is also really, really common because it does have a benefit to you and to the community, because obviously when you open source it, the people could contribute that, fix patches, things of that nature, which is always really nice. So the second route would be not fully open source, or sorry, to be fully open source. It's not quite as common, although it's still pretty common, as you'll see in a little bit. And it's really, you do that when the money isn't really not in the data or the code, or sorry, when the money is in the data and not really the code. And you'll see a lot of this for like article sites, content sites, or video sites. A few examples would be like, Go Django and Buddy Lindsay, if he's watching right now, I'm not sure. His site's fully open source, which is nice, and he just has the video contents not in GitHub or hosted somewhere else. Travis, they do the same thing. They have all their software open source, but they go ahead and allow you as a service. They set it up for you. They get it running for you. They make it really easy to work with, and you just pay a little subscription fee. And in general, you don't have to do all that heavy lifting, so you don't have to do. A lot of other ones do the same thing, like WordPress offers hosting. Of course, devs use that as well. Firefox does searching, so when you do searches, they get revenue based on when you click ads. And some even do like donations. Like Krita is a image editor. It's kind of like Photoshop, but it relies on donations instead of just purchasing it outright. So overall, you can still make money with open source even if your entire platform is open source, just because people would pay not to have the headache of setting things up, to manage it themselves, and to fix problems if it ever comes up. They'll just rely on you for all of that. And overall, that's my presentation. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to. I know Groovecode is kind of watching the channels out and making sure if there's any questions that we'll hear about them.
Yeah, there's a lot of channels to watch, though.
So
if anyone else is watching them.
Yeah, only, what, 3 or 4?
Yeah, I've got like the Google Hangout questions, Google Hangout chat. I'm watching Slack and IRC and YouTube comments. Like, it's a jungle out there. I guess we'll leave it and let people ask any questions for a while before I start into mine. I have a question, Blaine. What beer are you drinking?
I am not drinking a beer. I'm just drinking water. I'm boring. What beer are you drinking? I saw that you posted a link earlier, didn't you?
Yeah, it's the Marshall Mosaic. All right, no questions yet.
Well, I guess I hope everybody starts versioning all their stuff and hopefully open sourcing it. This kind of shows a little bit about how and why.
What's your favorite Git tutorial? Asks Kendall Wirtz.
Favorite Git tutorial? I think there's a website called Git SVN, or not Git SVN, but the Git book. There's a Git book. Git SCM. Not sure if can you guys still see that screen? Yeah. So it kind of goes over just different. It actually comes in a book, but this is like the online version of the book, and you can. Am I muted? Just making sure. Okay, awesome. There's an online version of the book. It just kind of goes through all the different Git basics or whatever. It was actually like on the first week of my job at Vitals. They hadn't got my computer yet, so I read this book like 4 times, and I feel like I am now a Git master. So I definitely recommend this book to anybody that's getting started with Git and trying to learn the ropes. I know a lot of the other ones, like I mentioned, like the draft one, which draft versioning. Pulled up a little bit earlier. This one's a little bit easier. It commits automatically. They don't actually do like commit messages or anything like that. It's more for writers. It's really nice. It doesn't do like the line by line diff, but the word by word diff, which is really nice. And it doesn't need a whole lot of setup or anything. Just kind of jump in, start writing, and it'll take care of the rest.
There's also try.github.io, which is basically a combination of GitHub and Code School. And so it's kind of a famous 15-minute learn how to use Git, and you do it by typing in. So they've created like an online tool where it gives you an online command line. Kind of 15 minutes to jump through it, kind of very basic 101 type stuff. So yeah, try.github.io.
If you pay for the Code School subscription, you can get to the 2nd and 3rd levels as well, which is a little bit more advanced stuff. You can learn all kinds of fun stuff in there as well.
Oh my gosh, what window am I on? You use Bitbucket for Git hosting or other? From John Hassel.
Do I use Bitbucket?
It says, do you use Bitbucket for Git hosting or other?
So I personally just use GitHub for everything because I don't have anything that's really private. So everything that I have is on GitHub. It's open source. It's free. Anybody can use it. Anybody can have it. Most of it's MIT, so literally do whatever you want with it, which is nice. If you're choosing between Bitbucket or GitHub, I'd probably determine like how many users do you have and how many private repos do you have. Because depending on how many private repos you have, you might go with Bitbucket just because it allows you more private repos, or GitHub just because it's more of the communities there. I think obviously Bitbucket's synced with like Jira and things of like that nature, so it's a little bit easier for organizations. And then of course they're self-hosted, but that's a little bit of a hassle that I don't really want to deal with myself, so I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But personally, I use GitHub for everything, so I'd recommend that.
Yeah, another reason I use GitHub for everything is just there's so many tools built on top of GitHub, like with GitHub hooks and services and all this kind of stuff. So there's just kind of when you do GitHub, you're also getting the entire GitHub ecosystem, which has like continuous integration and coverage reporting and all kinds of tools and services built on top of GitHub.
Yep, and like I said in my presentation, it's really nice because they have diffing for almost every site type of file, 3D files, PSDs, obviously code, and things like that. So even if you're not a coder, you can still use GitHub to help you do versioning.
Yeah, they even have like diffs for GeoJSON, like maps.
Yeah,
map diffs and stuff like that.
They definitely are full featured for free.
All right, I'm gonna wait for a few other.
So I just wanted to interject real quick and ask if you've used Git for binary diffing, and what's your opinion on using it for that?
I personally never used it for binary diffing. I know a lot of the times when you're committing binary files, it just says, you committed a binary file, we're not even going to show you the diff. So I've never done that. Well, I guess I have done that, but I don't really use it for diffing. I usually just, if I have a binary file, I know I updated it correctly. It's usually like a lock file or something, which isn't really binary, but they assume it's a binary, and you can kind of see the diff. But I've never, I guess, never really committed real binaries to. I mean, yeah. There's not a whole lot of opinion there.
Cool. Let's leave it for another minute or two for any more questions to come in. Yeah, I can already tell what we need to do next time is figure out the Hangouts and have like one chat channel that works for everybody.
Is it possible to find a chat channel that works for everybody?
I'm thinking just Twitter.
We always got that one guy that doesn't have a Twitter, though. Maybe we can like throw a web IRC channel or IRC client on that's also web devs.
Ah, that's not a bad idea. That's actually a pretty good idea. Just have the IRC channel and
we already have an IRC channel, so we just set up the client.
Yeah. Yes. Good suggestion. I'm also scheming about how we would do this whenever we are also meeting in person. So like setting up somebody's laptop to be the like broadcast laptop, right? All right.
Chat already has Freenode already has an online web chat option if we wanted to use that.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Let me see if I can figure out how to get my screen shared. You are screen sharing. Present to everyone. All right. Can people see that? I'm answering Tammy's question if the in-person meetings are this quiet, and I would have to say, no, definitely not. That's why this feels really weird, because I'm sitting here in my quiet house, drinking a beer, talking about Git to my monitors. Now Blaine is taking a picture. Go check the Tulsa Web Dev's Twitter. I take a picture of, I put on them, I have 3 monitors here, and so I put all 3 of the talks up on each of the screens for a second, just to show all 3 of them going on at once. It was a pretty good picture. All right, I'm going to get started on mine. I'm going to leave, as I'm going, I'm just going to leave my IRC and Slack and the questions tab open. So hit me up on any of those with questions. Let me see, if I make this smaller or bigger, does it get better? Oops, not like that, it doesn't. There, maybe that's a little more. Using more screen space. Okay, so we're at 7 o'clock. We are ripping through the meeting tonight. So Blaine talked about sort of the why of version control and especially Git, and I'm basically rehashing a talk that I gave at TU last year before we did Code Across, which was the basics of Git and GitHub. This deck is kind of meant to be an interactive thing, but especially since we're just on Hangouts, I'm just going to kind of go through it, and I will watch questions come through, but I won't pretend that we can have anybody follow along in any real sense. Okay, so Git version control, there's all this technical stuff about why you should use Git, but you can get that anywhere. So I think we already mentioned the Git SCM website basically has all of the technical details about Git are up there. And there are very, very many technical details. So if you really want to geek out on version control, Git is the version control for you. Also, the entire Pro Git book is actually available on Git SCM, which is that Git book. So you can either buy the dead tree version if you like to kill the planet, or you can just go to it online if you like to kill bits instead of atoms. So let's jump right into some, I guess, code examples of Git and GitHub. When we did 200 OK, we made this really cool. Dungan's on here now. Dungan made this really cool app for mapping all of the 200 OK attendees. So there's this github.com/code4Tulsa. If you go to github.com/code4Tulsa, if you're new to GitHub, what you'll see is you'll see the organization's page, and the left side list here is all of the projects, and in the right you can see all of the people that are in this organization. So one of the projects that we had in there was this thing, TU attendees, which was basically just a JSON file along with some CSS and JS. But when you click on one of these projects, what you're looking at now is this, it's the project view. And the project here is TU attendees. So it shows you it's underneath the Code4Tulsa org, it's TU attendees. And one of the nice things about GitHub is code is front and center of everything. So as soon as you click to a project, you're looking at the actual code tree there. You're looking at the files and the folders that are in the project. So yeah, the first part there is the person or the org. The second part there is the project. And then down here are the files. So sort of the key part of distributed SCM and Git, and especially GitHub, is this concept of forking. So whenever you're going to fork something, you're basically making a copy repository, and you're putting it into a copy of all of the folders, all of the files, and all of the history of those folders and files, and you're putting it into your own space so that you can mess with it without messing up the original. If you click this, you're going to have to sign up. The sign-up process is very easy. It's username, email, password. Just choose the free version because you want to write open source code because you love the world. Then you verify your email address, and once you do, you basically get back to a project, and then when you click fork, GitHub will do this forking process. So what they're basically doing is they're just copying all of that organization's projects, folders and files into your own space. So now you have your version of the project. So it's basically, if it's mine, it's groovecoder/TU attendees is the new project, right? Funny cat picture. Yay. So you can do, once you have sort of a fork of your own that lives on GitHub, what you want to do is clone it down to your own machine. And if you ever just try to do a git clone, if you don't have it, then you need to go get it and install it. Once you've installed it, you do a git clone. It's going to go out to GitHub, and it's going to do all this technical status output about receiving objects and all that kind of stuff. So it's verbose and cryptic because that's what Git likes to do. Now, if you actually go into that folder, you'll see that you have the files and the folders. They're all in there. So that's great. If you open up like the attendees.json file, you'll see the file as it existed whenever you cloned it, whenever you forked it and you cloned it. Then if you go and add like a bunch of data underneath it, I'm in the editor This is Vim, and I have a plugin in Vim that basically detects changes between what I checked out and what I've actually edited, so it shows the little plus signs next to all of the lines that I have added to this file. Okay, so then you'll run a get status. Let's say you open that file, you write the changes to that file. When you run a get status, Git is going to show you that you have modified the attendees.json file, right? It'll tell you that you're on a branch called master. And so a branch is sort of a fundamental concept in Git and GitHub. A branch is basically just a name that you can give to like a snapshot of the whole project. So you have a branch called master is sort of the default. Everything happens on master. But then you can make other branches, and I think I have more slides in here for that stuff. So when you get status, it's basically telling you to use git add to update or to add things that will be committed. So this is sort of the logical diagram of the different areas in a Git repository. So you've got local, you've got remote. When you get add, you're basically staging changes that you want to make final. Oops. So you get add, and then when you do a get status, it'll actually change the status of that file to being staged. And then you're going to do a get commit, which is actually going to commit the file, the changes that you made. You're going to get prompted for a commit message that just basically describes what you changed. So add somebody to the attendees. And then if you do a get status, it'll say your branch is ahead of the origin branch by 1 commit. So origin is sort of a new concept here. The origin is a remote, and this is the difference between, I guess, central source control management and distributed source control management. So a remote is basically, sorry, I'll go back here. The remote here called origin is pointing to GitHub. So I have the entire repository on my machine, and then I have the repository up on GitHub. And they're both complete copies of the entire repository. So there's a remote, my local machine has this concept of a remote, and it's called origin, and it's actually pointing to the GitHub repository. So the way to get changes that you've committed to your local repository to a remote is to use a git push. So when you do git push, you say git push, and it will push it up to GitHub. So again, verbose and cryptic messages. Whenever you push changes up to GitHub onto your fork on GitHub, what you're going to do next is actually sort of I would call it the central feature of GitHub, which is to create a pull request. So you click on this green button and it says create pull request. You can say show diff stats, and it'll tell you that you changed the file attendees.json, right? So then you can create a pull request. The pull request starts with your commit message, which is why it's really nice and important to have concise and easy to read commit messages. You can add some extra comments that are only going to show up on GitHub, not in the Git log. So if he paid me to do his homework, but he wants to check it in, all of this will only be between him and me. So you send the pull request, and the pull request now goes back to the organization, the original project from which you forked. They're going to see a pull request that has my commit with my changes, and it's basically me asking to take my changes into the original project, right? Now, if you go and look at the network graph, which is all the branches, you'll see GitHub will actually display my branch master as basically it's that concept of the fork. It forks off of Code for Tulsa, right? So that's just showing a visual representation of the branch. So let's try it. Let's cheat. Let's see. So this was interactive stuff. What you can do is you can actually, on GitHub itself, if you click on one of these files on GitHub, you can click an edit button on GitHub itself, and GitHub will let you edit files directly on GitHub. And then when you go to the bottom after you've made your changes, there's a little thing that says commit changes, and it has the commit message and all of that stuff. So you can create a commit message there. And that's why we love GitHub. So whenever you do hit commit changes, you still have a commit, you have the same exact thing, and you can create a pull request based on that. So you don't have to actually do all of the cloning and all of that stuff on your local machine. If you just want to edit files, you can do it all on GitHub. So again, Code for Tulsa at the organization. If you're part of the organization, then when you see pull requests, you'll see this merge pull request button. And that's basically saying, I want to bring this person's changes into the original project. So you'll click merge pull request, confirm the merge, and then the graph is going to look like this. So this is showing you kind of what happened is that all of those little blue forks that came off was somebody making a change, creating a pull request, and then it got merged back into the original project. So when you look at projects on GitHub, this is why you'll see this sort of graph view, is because somebody forked it, they made a change, they sent a pull request back, and then it got merged back. Let me cheat real quick and look ahead to see what else is in here. Yeah, we'll do the get fetch part, and then I think we might just start asking for questions. So let's say that the original project makes some changes since you've cloned it. What you need to do is you need to get all of their changes from that remote over to your local box, to your laptop. The way you do that is with this get fetch command, right? And this is really confusing because I put a funny cat picture on top of what's actually happening. Also, a funny owl picture. What the hell was I thinking? Cats and owls and whatever. Oh my gosh, I've broken everything. Sorry. Just move. What does that say? Okay, let's just get fetch. Sorry, I haven't done this presentation in a while. Okay, owls and cats aside. When you get fetch, you will fetch all of the changes from remote. In this case, I'm adding the remote Code for Tulsa. So now I have two remotes. I have my project up on GitHub, and then I have the Code for Tulsa project up on GitHub. And this is the concept of having multiple remotes. So one of my remotes is called Code for Tulsa, and it points to Code for Tulsa's repo on GitHub. And the other one of my remotes is called Origin, and it points to my fork of that project up on GitHub. But they're both living on GitHub, which is why they're both remote to my laptop. So when I get fetch Code for Tulsa, it will find that, hey, people changed the attendees.json file, and it got merged, so here's the new changes from the Code for Tulsa branch, or from the Code for Tulsa remote. So now at this point, if I run a get branch, I have my master, but if I do a get branch -a, it will show me all branches, including all of the remote branches. So it shows you that there's this Code for Tulsa master branch now. It was the updated one. So now I actually have all of those changes, but I'm not working on them. The way you get to work on them is you do a get checkout. So you get checkout from the Code for Tulsa remote /master branch. And that will actually put all of the files that are on your machine into the state of the Code for Tulsa master branch. So when you do that, you'll see that it basically shows it's at the place where it merged the pull request number 1. So that is sort of the GitHub fork, some of the remotes, fetches, branches. I shot through it really fast because it's kind of meant to be more interactive. So if we had been in person, we'd have a lot more questions going on at the same time. So I'm going to pause there and let people throw in comments or questions for a second. And I'll wait a couple minutes, I guess. And if anyone wants me to like go back into one of those things, let me know, because I can go back to it. But this one's a hard one to do over a Hangout. So Kendall's asking if a pull and a fetch are the same thing. No. So a fetch basically will just go out to a remote and grab all of the changes, but it won't mess with any of the files that are on your local. So you can basically go get all of the changes that are out there, and that's a fetch. Now, if you do a pull, you basically do a fetch, go get me all of the changes, and then also merge those changes into my current working directory. So I use fetch. Like, I almost never use pull, just because pull is going to merge things, and I'm never quite sure if I want to merge. I always want to do that manually. So fetch is kind of the safest thing to do. Just go like fetch me all of these changes. I just want to have them on my local machine, but I don't want you to mess with my my existing files. If you do a merge, it'll actually do a fetch plus, or if you do a pull, it will actually do a fetch plus a merge, which can change your existing files and your existing commit, your existing repo, and all that kind of stuff. So I always do a fetch first and then manually merge if I want to. I have no idea what this picture is, but it's funny, so I'm leaving it there while I wait for a few more questions. Okay, John is asking if there's conflict handling involved with a pull request. Yeah, so one of the nice things about GitHub is that if you create a pull request and the changes that you've made are going to conflict with changes that have already landed, on GitHub, the merge pull request button will actually be disabled, and you won't be able to click it, and it'll say basically, hey, we couldn't automatically merge these changes because there was a conflict, so you need to resolve these conflicts manually. And at that point, whenever I see that, I basically, what I usually do is ask the person who sent the pull request. I basically tell them, hey, you need to fetch the latest changes from master, put them on your local machine, and then resolve these conflicts, and then send the pull request again with like unconflicted changes. If they're not comfortable doing that, then I can do it myself. So I can actually add their GitHub fork as a remote to mine, and I can pull the branch down that they're asking for a pull request. So I can actually do that, and I can resolve the conflicts myself and then send a new pull request. The really nice thing about Git and GitHub is that if I go and get their branch, I can grab their changes, but I can only do the conflict resolution, and then I save that. It becomes a new commit, and when I send a pull request, it will still have their original commit, and it will have my commit that resolves the conflicts. So they can still get credit for making the original commit, and then it shows that I was the one who went and resolved the conflicts. What are you talking about, Blaine? All right, switching back to Q&A for a while. Actually, I'm going to scroll through and see what all topics this covers. I have lots of rage faces in my presentations. It's probably a good insight into how I actually code day in, day out. Oh, geez, this presentation is crazy. Oh, I don't know how to close the question. Oh, there we go. Done. All right, I am going to talk about at least one more of these features, which is GitHub Pages. So GitHub Pages is a way that you can actually, oh, wait, John's asking something else, sorry. Are all previous versions kept on both local and remote repositories? So the thing about Git and being distributed is that you kind of get to control the changes that you want to bring in. So if you have a fork on GitHub and I have a fork on GitHub, and then you have a local copy and I have a local copy, all of those repos contain basically all of the versions, all of the previous versions, all of the history, at least from the time when they were forked or cloned from one of those other ones. So that is always going to be there. Now, having said that, if you have changes on your laptop and I have a repository on my laptop, I could basically go and do a bunch of fetching and a bunch of pushing between GitHub and my laptop. And if you don't put your changes up onto GitHub, then I'm not going to have any of your history until you do that. So it's kind of a crazy new way of thinking about the version history. The version history is basically kept everywhere at the same time, but that also means that if I want to see the version history from your repository, you do have to push it up somewhere that I can access. Like you have to push it onto GitHub or something where I can actually go and access it and pull all of your history. So one thing you could do is if you created a private repository fork of a project and then you could push a bunch of your own changes up there, I still wouldn't be able to access it. And I might have my repository and I might sit there and change things on GitHub, between GitHub and between my repository, and I might not know anything about your changes, your versions, or your history. All right, anything else before we go on to GitHub Pages? And that may be the last thing I talk about, and then let everybody run off if they won't. All right, so I'm going to talk real quickly about GitHub Pages. So I love this. I love GitHub Pages. It's basically free static website hosting on GitHub. If your website is open source. The way it works is you essentially just create a branch called gh-pages in your project, and then basically go over, check out that branch, and then git push up to your origin gh-pages so that there is now a gh-pages branch up on GitHub itself. And when you do that, let's see if I can fix this. So if you do that, what GitHub will actually do is they will take your username .github.io/the project name, and they will host all of your files that are in that repository, in that project. They will just host it at that URL for you. So if you make an index.html file, stick it into a repository, and call the branch gh-pages, you'll be able to get to it from there. So I think you can actually go right now to tulsawebdevs.github.io and go to 200OK-attendees. Let me see if I can make this work. See if I can share my, actually, I'm going to change my share screen. Yeah, here we go. All right, can everybody see this one now? Should be able to. So yeah, this is actually the application, the static HTML5 application that Dungan made. And if you look at also Web Devs 200OK attendees, just heard a ding. I don't know which of my various channels dinged at me. So probably this one. But if you go to github.com/tulsawebdevs/200OK-attendees, what you'll notice is that this project is actually just a bunch of CSS and JavaScript. So there's an index.html. It includes a bunch of JavaScript files. There's an attendees.json file, which is loaded in by JavaScript. So since all of that is just static HTML, and since there's this branches gh-pages, which has exactly the same code, this is actually doing that trick when you go to tulsawebdevs.github.io/200OK-attendees. So it's serving up that static HTML app, which is doing exactly what I mean, it's an HTML5 app, so it's still running. It's still running all of the JavaScript, all of the CSS, but all of that stuff just lives in a GitHub repository with a gh-pages branch, which means that it's free web hosting for this app, right? So this was the thing that Dungan made. Dungan, did you want to say anything else, anything more about this? I see you're on the Hangout. I don't know if you want to say anything else about it. I can't hear you. I don't know if you have a microphone or not. Dang. I can't hear Dungan. I don't know if anyone else can hear Dungan. All right, I have to go on without him. But yeah, in any case, this is basic GitHub Pages in action. It's just static HTML files served from a GitHub address. Any questions on GitHub pages? Are there restrictions on GitHub pages like scripts or blogs? So basically, it's an HTML5 application can run there. If you, let me go look in the code here for attendees. Oh, there's an Angular thing in here. So this has changed since I last looked at it. And we would definitely need Duncan to figure out how the Angular part is working, because I have no idea how that works. Yeah, load URL attendees.json. So basically, I do know that the JSON file here, if you're going to load it via JSON, then it has to load from the same project. Otherwise, you would get into a cross-site, or basically a cross-site request issue. I can see Duncan's video, but I can't hear him. No. Yeah, just sign languages. So that's, I do know that there is also, I'm actually looking at this. So Jekyll is basically a way to transform plain text markdown files into HTML. And GitHub Pages supports this. So you can basically do Jekyll websites. So Jekyll is kind of a very rudimentary sort of static site generator where you don't have to code all of the HTML. You can code Markdown. And I think there's some like this thing called Liquid, which has a very rudimentary sort of feature set of being able to do loops and being able to like pull in a list of create a links to like a list of pages that are inside a directory and that kind of stuff. So there is a little bit of sort of scripting and dynamic stuff allowed in the form of Jekyll with GitHub Pages, but for the most part, I've just always used it with static HTML, CSS, and JavaScript living in a GitHub repo. And Duncan, what you might need to do is click your gear icon inside of Google Hangouts itself and make Google Hangouts use your built-in microphone or your built-in output. And that's pretty much all I had. The other slides in my deck go through actual fixing of conflicts and stuff like that, but that's going to be impossible to do. So, any other questions? All right. Still can't hear Duncan. He's going to eat his damn headset before we actually get to hear him. Blaine, got anything to add?
Nope.
All right. How do you wind one of these things down?
That's a good question. It's like we're new to this or something.
Yeah.
Probably the same way we do it with any normal meeting, right?
We start talking and drink beer.
Yeah, yell at everyone to go to McNally's, but don't actually
Exactly.
do it because the roads are crazy, so don't go do that. I'm sad because we're at 9 viewers, which means that if we had figured out how to do it, we could have had everybody just in one giant hangout. So
What does Google Hangouts limit you to as far as viewers in the Hangout go?
if you do 10 or less, I think 10 or fewer people can basically join a hangout, right? And they can all have video and audio.
How are the other talks doing?
I saw Manu's. There was like another 9 or 10 on his whenever I closed it out to start this one. I didn't really look at I looked at Tammy's just for a little bit. But I'm going to email both of them and basically ask them, after you close these things down, there's a way to like publish it to YouTube. So I'm going to ask them to basically publish it and then grab the YouTube video links or whatever.
Kindle's got a good comment. Just have McNelly set up a video feed. Great
Yeah,
idea.
man.
Get on that, Luke.
McNally's webcam. I'm going to have my next one, or my last one, I guess. There's only a little bit left.
Oh, I thought you were going to drink a full jug of that.
No, not quite.
What is that noise?
Dang, Duncan. All right. That's it for me. We're almost at our regular time. I can't believe we used that much time. So, yeah, that's about it. I'll make sure to get all of the recordings for all of the talks posted on the website and on Facebook and Google Plus and all that stuff. So that's it. And we may try this again in person next time. So catch you all later. Okay. I'm stopping the broadcast. You don't have to go anywhere, but